Bye. Eddie, see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Okay. Bye. Y'all ready for this?
This is it. Network Africa.
I'm very honoured this morning to have with me in the studio Vincent Magombe from Uganda, the courageous African writer who fled his country after writing a play about Idi Amin. But you've just set up a group, the African Writers Abroad Centre. Tell us about the centre and what it hopes to do.
I approached International Pen some time back and said, well, International Pen does quite a lot of good things, fighting for the rights and freedoms of writers who are in prison or who are being repressed by their governments. So International Pen allowed us to set up our own African Center.
Vincent, you've got a poem, I believe, that you want to read.
Well, I have a poem here which touches the issues that Pen International Center, to which I'm General Secretary, is going to tackle. That's the issue of the place of a writer in society and how society treats its writers. Because this poem is dedicated to Okot Pabitek, a poet who died in 1982 in Uganda. He died a frustrated man, completely seen as just a drunkard or something. And he's our greatest poet. So I look at him as a winemaker. He brews wine, they drink it, get drunk. And then when he's dying and asks for a droplet of this wine, they hide their goods. So it's called The Winemaker. In the desert lands of the poet's artistic life, there is an oasis of something done. There yonder by the sand dunes of ignorance, the poet has brewed some palm wine. Lifelong he has brewed a conch wine of madness, and to his songs they have danced in the aging years of drunkardness. Yet when once the dying poet, in the micro-world of his pen, would for a droplet of life yawn, the drinkers of palm wine, dancing and singing as if all was fine, would hide their goods as if he were to blame that things went wrong. So that's about Okot Pabitek, but it's about anybody. About 13 years ago, Idi Amin had just been overthrown, but during Idi Amin, in my school days, I was writing a play about him. So immediately Idi Amin went away, I wrote this, concluded the play called The Fall and Trial of Idi Amin, and set up a group called the Uganda Youth Enterprise to act it. I was an actor. I was, in fact, acting Idi Amin with a big stomach.
Yes. But your physical appearance is quite the opposite.
That's the irony of it, because when you saw me on the stage, you thought I was Idi Amin. Afterwards, when I'd taken away 20 shirts and the coats and 20 or 10 trousers, you couldn't really imagine I was the one. But the most important was that I could bring out the psychology. And I could deepen my voice of Idi Amin and say, I am the Idi Amin of Uganda, the field muscle, 3 feet wide, 7 feet tall, the all conqueror of the British Empire. So I could bring out that psychology. But it sent me into a lot of problems. Because one day in the theater where we were acting, that was after Idi Amin, but a group of army men came in, and a gun was put on me, cocked, and just by God's luck, it didn't explode. The bullets fell out of the magazine, and this army man ran to collect the bullets back. Well, later on I heard it was a safety catch which was closed. So that is it. Now I escaped that assassination attempt, and they kept following us around. Our house was kept by the security forces for the government there, but it was becoming increasingly unsafe. Generally, I would say that there's a little bit of improvement in the situation from what it was before. In that, generally, when you look at Africa, already the mere fact that people are talking about, freedom that should come, and talking about it, and they are not talking about, that time we're talking about freedom from colonialists. Already many people are talking about freedom from the present dictatorships and from the new type of, let's say, IMF and World Bank domination of Africa like that. So that alone is very good, and I've seen some few signs here and there of people trying to really struggle on those lines to say, well, maybe tomorrow. So it promises that tomorrow something could be better, I think.
But also they need intellectuals like you. You're living in London. I mean, would you go back if you could? I
think unless our people, especially the leaders today, realize that problem, there's nothing that's going to work. Because for Uganda, just to give you an example, almost the whole of Ugandan intellectual society has run out and is running out. I've been getting letters from, people, writers and others in Uganda saying, well, we're just almost going even naked. I can't even dress. I don't have clothes. I don't have this and that because of the economic situation. Things are very bad. I can't do this and that. And would you maybe get me somewhere or tell me how I can come to the West? People are going even to South Africa. In fact, I read just yesterday in the newspaper, from a London newspaper, saying, well, so many doctors and others have gone to South Africa, and they were mentioning Uganda specifically as being pioneers of the new wave of African people running to South Africa. So that, I mean, the whole of the countries, people are drained, and those are the people to run the new modern equipment, modern industry, modern way of developing a country.
So by founding a pen center for African writers abroad, basically, to me, looks as a sign that you count on being abroad for a long time. Because you
not really. The Pen Center for African Writers Abroad, what we want to do is to make a campaign so that the harassment and repression of African writers within Africa stops today, tomorrow, so that we can be able to go back home. So it is a way of looking at home and wanting change immediately. We can blame the colonialists and imperialists. That's very good, because we know that in Uganda, IMF, World Bank policies could have caused a lot of hardships for people. But we need, I think, to focus very much inwards. We need to start looking at ourselves. I mean, you can't fight against a strong enemy, colonialism or imperialism, when you yourselves are weak, you are killing your own people, you are not even talking about development programs, you're talking more about corruption and all those things. So we need first to start looking inwards. I really respect people who are starting to criticize Africans and Africans for their problems much more than even you can shout about imperialism or colonialism. Because many of our leaders are just as bad as the so-called imperialists or colonialists. After the break of Soviet Union, I think even the focus of Western political policy has switched to the East. I recently attended, about a year and so, I attended the summit, the G7 summit, which was in London. And I wrote an article called Africa Under the Table at the G7 summit. Everything is going to the Soviet Union because of the Soviets are educated, there's the industrial base, and so resources can be very quickly brought from there, and Africa, people are still very uneducated, whatever. So that we have to stand now on our own and really think. We must start thinking. For all this time, we thought, well, Soviet Union will think for us against the Americans, or the Americans will think for another country against the Soviets. Now, there's nothing like that. In fact, there's only one superpower in the world, which somehow, and if you talk about not only the superpower, it's the only Western greatness in the world. And with the imperialist past, the colonial past, I mean, we have to know that these things can come back. The colonial domination can come back very easily. Mandela has been saying last week or so, he says the greatest danger to this country is the white, fascist clique. It's not for me. It is the black people, because even if you hand that power to them, and if they're going to fight, there's a lot of arms. Nkasa has what they call the cultural weapons and all that. The hatred that is between them is totally not needed. So that he is now saying, well, the white people, some of them should remain behind. But how can they remain if they are going to be killed as well? And then how do they fight to the end to take away the apartheid system, really, if they are so divided and killing each other? So I believe if South Africa is going to have a future at all, then the black people, the majority, must say, we must start learning from the history of the rest of Africa, that the divisions, the tribalism, the hatred between ourselves cannot do us any good, and it will be more dangerous than even that which they have fought for 70 years to overthrow.
They don't learn from history. They are the prisoners of their own history, it looks. Well,
they will be. They will be if they don't learn from that history. They will be the prisoners of their own history. Of course, I respect Mandela. I wrote a play called The Voice of Mandela. That was 79, about Mandela. And when he was in prison, and he was saying in that play, he looks forward to the future, to the freedom of his people. And I was really thinking, yes, that is it. And today, even I believe that he has something sensible. He's saying, well, we shouldn't fight against each other. We need peace. I mean, even between the blacks and the whites, there must be peace after the freedom comes. But many South Africans are actually saying, well, Mandela he looks to be more concerned with getting peace at the top, and not looking at the mass and the core mass of the youth and the people in the ghettos in South Africa. So that there is a bit of irony. And that's why some of us say we must not make gods out of presidents of Africa. If we made a mistake to say that tomorrow, Nelson Mandela, he has suffered so much and we have all respect for him, that's true. But if we make him a god, so that when he comes to power, you can't criticize him because he's absolutely correct, then we shall go back to the same problems we've had before. So I believe that there must be a level of critique, especially from the masses, from those who are educated, from the people themselves. They must be able to criticize the establishments. But what is happening at this level in South Africa among the black people is not promising, towards that type of thought. What's happening in African countries is just the same, that, the leaders come, Museveni says he thinks he's the best person, only person who can rule Uganda. There's so many people.
All leaders say that.
Yes, they all say that, but the problem is that in Europe even they say so, but when the election comes and they lose, they give up. But in Africa, they even fight against the elections coming. And then, therefore, they impose themselves they don't just say it, they impose themselves in power.
But they will just say, African leaders, what does democracy mean to starving people anyway? But that's what they will say.
One of the problems why people are starving is the lack of democracy. Because in Somalia, take the case of Somalia, that you see those kids dying because the warlords, are fighting and they haven't allowed anybody to talk about any other alternative towards the development of Somalia. So that a certain set of dictatorial, power is in power.
But
yes,
that means that in Somalia you needed the intervention of the West. Because otherwise they would have...
Logically, somebody had to come and stop that madness. It was true. And I've said so. Because we have to believe that our people sometimes are so bad themselves that they go out into madness, like Somali warlords and Siad Baris have done, to just kill your own young children. I have a small poem. It's called War Mills, 4 lines. Very, very graphic description of bloodshed for children like of Somalia, warlords. It's called War Mills. At breakfast, the children ate bullets fired from the mouths of their fathers. And at lunch, they ate time bombs hidden in the breasts of their mothers. At supper, they licked the blood from the wounds of other children. But where is the milk, they asked, and no one could answer. It explains the situation. It should be enshrined within the United Nations Convention of Human Rights that it's a crime for developed countries or Western countries or Eastern countries or others to perpetuate dictatorship in any country in Africa, either through the sale of arms or through saying, well, economic linkage, this is strategic interest of our country, so he needs to be there, so that really they are responsible sometimes for people suffering the longer, part. And I think it's a good idea that these things should go into the United Nations, Charter for Human Rights. Or look at it this way. The mere fact that now they know people are suffering, people are oppressed, and you can't come to our country. Europe is there's this fortress Europe being built around Europe. Saying, well, so much influx from the south into the north. But which African has ever questioned, for example, the fact that we had white settlers, European settlers, in Kenya and others? Of course, like in South Africa, they came and imposed themselves and wanted to rule alone. But if it was sort of settling and sharing the riches together, African people have always allowed these people to come. And even up to today, there are fewer restrictions from European people, business people going to Africa doing their business, than African people coming to Europe to do business. And I'm not even talking about rich business. It's just coming and sweeping a toilet, which jobs many of the white people can't do, and you get some little money. That's a form of business for a person who is starving and can't eat anything in Africa. So why is it I can allow a millionaire from Britain or anywhere to come and do millionaire business in my country without any restriction, take away all the profits? And when I come here, they say, no, we have to build a fortress, Europe. This is really absurd. The West has some sort of responsibility to see that African economies really take off. There must be a shift in the way or approach in the way the West wants to do business in Africa. They should come to do business. Yes, they should get something out of it. But they should also know that primarily we want to get Africa up. But up to today, the emphasis has been on what best conditions can you give the West and the North. And then they just don't think of what are the profits or any benefits by the people of the South. In fact, already people have been complaining, saying, well, why can't the West waive away all the debt, accumulated debt? And the West is saying, well, you know, we can't do that sometimes. Of course, they have been at one time saying, well, let's give a little bit like that. But that's true. If they don't do so, then the economies keep collapsing, the inflation rises, and we can't pay the debt. So it will, in the end, even affect what the West can get from Africa. I mean, there will be social commotion, social chaos, and coups and counter-coups. We shall see more Saddam Hussein's, if we take him to Africa, or more Idi Amin's coming up.
Vele van de 200 Aziaten die door Nederland gastvrij werden opgenomen nadat ze door president Amin uit Oeganda waren verdreven, leren Nederlands om zo gemakkelijker vertrouwd te raken met het Nederlandse leven.
Ken je nog een ander woord? Excursie of een tochtje, hè? Goed zo.
Er zijn er verscheidenen die zich na 2 maanden les al aardig kunnen redden.
Wat gaan ze daar doen, Jansna?
Ging naar de winkel sigaretten te kopen.
Ja, met of zonder filter?
Zonder filter, zonder filter.
Alsjeblieft. 1,75 €.
Zoals overal leren de kinderen de vreemde taal zonder grote problemen.
Een heleboel Nederlanders, een heleboel mensen in Nederland fietsen. Jullie misschien ook wel een keertje. En hoe komen we aan die fiets? Is dat altijd zo eentje geweest hier? Of was het vroeger wat anders?
Er was vroeger een loopfiets.
Een loopfiets.
Toch zullen de kinderen voorlopig zeker niet vervreemden van de eigen volksaard, want de bannelingen houden geregeld culturele en religieuze bijeenkomsten. Intussen zijn de meeste Oegandezen uit de opvangcentra in Bennekom en Nieuw-Milligen verhuisd naar duurzamer woningen, vooral in het oosten en zuiden van ons land, onder andere in Arnhem, waar deze opnamen gemaakt werden. Gemeenten en woningbouwverenigingen hebben meegewerkt bij het beschikbaar stellen van de huizen voor de merendeels kinderrijke gezinnen. Nu gaat het erom zo snel mogelijk werk te vinden voor de mannen, van wie velen in Oeganda eigenaren waren van bloeiende zaken die hun door Amin werden afgenomen. Zij zijn bereid zich volledig aan te passen aan de Nederlandse gewoonten. Al zal dat proces bij hen misschien iets minder snel verlopen dan bij de kinderen die daarmee nauwelijks moeite hebben.